If you didn't get the right length spokes, then probably the ends of the spokes are sticking out beyond the tops of the nipples, and they're going to punch holes in your tube, so you'll have to start over again. Okay, we're back to the valve hole. Let's stop here and take stock. We have enough tension on this wheel now. You'll notice that if you squeeze the spokes like this, that there's a lot of tension on them. If you pluck it, got a nice high-pitched ping. And so we've done a rear wheel, we've tensioned it, and we've added 3 turns to the free wheel side to dish it. So for the sake of clarity, let's take a look at a front wheel and see how they compare. Okay, now we have a front and a rear wheel out here. If you look at the front wheel, you see that the axle is symmetric with respect to the flanges. See, the front wheel has an axle which sticks out the same distance from each flange. If you built a front wheel, you would not have had to add the extra 3 turns on one side, because there is no free wheel side. One side's the same as the other. Now, the rear wheel, if you look at it, it is now right in the middle. The rim is located dead in the center, or very close to it. We haven't done our final check, but it's very close to the center of the distance between the ends of the axles. But if you look at the flanges, you'll see that the rim is distinctly pulled over the free wheel side flange. You see that? Now, the principle we followed in building this wheel is to increase the tension gradually and evenly. So all of the spokes on this side should have the same tension, and all of the spokes on this side should have the same tension. And if we've done it right, if we've kept the effective length of each of those spokes the same, when we spin this wheel, even though we haven't started to true it yet, we should have a nice straight wheel. Well, here we are at the easy part. If you've done the tensioning and the lacing properly, the truing is going to be the easiest part of the job. We've got a nice bike stand here, which makes it easier. The ideal thing is to have a real official wheel truing stand. But if you don't have a wheel truing stand, you can true the wheel on your frame using your brake calipers as a guide. If you don't have a fancy stand like this, you can use a simple stand that you can buy at your bike shop that'll hold your wheels off the ground. Or if you don't have that, you can hang your bicycle by a couple of ropes in a doorway. But you want to find some way to get your bicycle off the ground so that you can use the frame as a guide. What you're trying to accomplish when you true your wheel is to make your wheel tight, true, and round. Now, if you've done a good job of tensioning the wheel, it's already pretty tight. Now, what we mean by tight is that you have a substantial amount of tension on each of the spokes. By round, we mean that the distance from the center of the hub to the edge of the rim is the same throughout the rotation of the wheel. So you don't want to have any up and down play. By true, we mean to say that the edges of the rims fall on the same plane through their full rotation. So how do we go about that? Well, essentially, you're going to true your wheel by making minor adjustments in tension of the spokes on one side or the other. And you have 4 basic moves that you can make. And to make a quick summary, the moves you have available are you may loosen 2 adjacent spokes to make the rim move further away from the center. That would remove a flat spot from your rim. Or you could tighten two adjacent spokes. If you tighten two adjacent spokes, it would draw the rim closer to the center. That would take a bump out of the rim. Or you could tighten this spoke and loosen this one, which would move the rim that direction, away from me. Alternatively, you could tighten this one and loosen this one. That would move the rim this way, that is, toward me. The wheel that's on the bicycle now is already true, but we can demonstrate these basic moves by practicing them on the rim and observing the effect that each move has. Let's demonstrate by making the moves in the same order we presented them. So for the first move, we're going to loosen two spokes. Let's really go whole hog here and take two 360-degree turns off each. Never do this on a real truing job, but just for purposes of demonstration. Now, look at the way the rim rises toward the bottom edge of the pen as we pass over that spot. Do you see that? Okay. Now, let's put it back. There we go. Got most of it out there. Now, the opposite move would be accomplished by tightening two spokes. I'm going to tighten these two adjacent spokes. Now, as it passes right there we go. Do you see it fall? Right there. Right there. Falls right there. Yeah, it's hard to see, but that's all you're going to get on a trued wheel like this. I think you're going to just have to go on authority because the next two are going to be much more obvious to see. This time I'm going to loosen a spoke on this side, that is the side closer to me. Two whole turns for demonstration purposes. And on this side I'm going to tighten it. That is on the side away from me over here. This is going to have a pretty obvious effect. You see what it did to the wheel? Right there, you see it? Boom. That's no good. Let's put it back. The final move, we're going to tighten a spoke on the side that's closer to me over here, and we're going to loosen a spoke on the far side. Then that will result in the rim moving this way toward me. Watch this. Now you notice as we bring this piece by the rim, it moves over this way toward this brake pad. There we are. Zonk. So in summary, when you're moving the rim either from side to side, either direction, the rim will always move in the direction of the spoke you tightened and away from the spoke you loosened. And in a sense, the same principle applies when you're trying to correct for roundness. Because when you tighten both spokes, it moves in the direction of the tightening, that is, toward the center. If you loosen both spokes, it moves away from the center. Well, now you know the basic moves for changing the position of your rim to make it straight and round. But there are a few more rules that you should follow when you're truing your wheel. I think probably the most important is that you work gradually, working your way around the wheel as you work. And never, ever apply more than one 360-degree turn to a single nipple and a single pass around the wheel. The second rule is find the largest deviation and work on that one first, and then go around the wheel and find lesser deviations and work on those. So you always work on the largest deviations first. The third rule is you start on the spoke at the center of the large deviation and work to the outside. Now that we know all the rules, let's true up the wheel that you built yourselves. Excuse me while I change this wheel. Now you recall that when we built this wheel, we dished it by adding 3 turns to every spoke on the freewheel side. That should bring the wheel into approximately correct dish. However, one of the things we have to accomplish while we're truing this wheel is to correct for any slight error in dishing that crude method might have produced. So let's start. I'm going to look and I'm going to observe the position of the rim compared to the position of the brake bolt. What I see here when I look down is that we haven't brought the rim quite far enough in this direction by adding 3 turns. So we're going to start making our corrections. Whenever we have a deviation, we're going to correct it in this direction. We're going to move the rim this way. So let's spin the wheel around and look and see if we can find the largest deviation. Right there, you see? Right there. You see the way it moves away from this brake pad? Right there. Let's find the center point. Okay. That's a long one. You see how far it goes? Now we're getting back. Okay, so right about here, that's about the center spoke in this deviation. So we're going to start here. We've got a big one. Let's put a whole turn on this spoke. Now you remember the second rule was that we start in the center. The third rule was that we work to the outside. And when I say we work to the outside, what I mean by that is that after we make a correction on the spoke in the center of the deviation, we go to either side, which would be these spokes, and make a correction about half the size. So now in this case we're going to loosen on the opposite side a half a turn and loosen about a half a turn. The net effect of this is that we've increased the tension on this side by a turn, and we've decreased the tension on this side by a turn by releasing a half a turn on each of these 2 spokes. Okay? This is such a broad one we can even go to the ones adjacent to those. Add a half a turn to this, and a half a turn to this, and release a half a turn from this one and this one. Could you? Here's one. See the center of this deviation right here? See, we're bringing in all the cases where the rim is moving too far that way, because we want to bring it over this way in general, toward me, to correct for the insufficient amount of dishing we put on it by adding 3 turns. I'm going to release a half turn on this side. We ought to be getting pretty close now. Let's spin the wheel and see what it looks like now that we've done a little bit of truing. Oh, you see, that's much better. Still not finished. I think we can start to make some corrections this direction. We've got the major ones out. Look here. You see the way it deviates right here? Here's the center point of that one. Let's bring it back. Put a full turn on that and release a half a turn here. and a half a turn here. All right, now the wheel's getting pretty true. It's not perfect, but it's pretty true. Let's take a look and see how we're doing as far as the dishing is concerned. So you really haven't got a good view of that yet. I'm going to take the seat out. I'm going to turn the bike down so you can get a better view. Okay. See, it's getting pretty true. Still got some minor deviations. And if you look at the end of the brake bolt and sight down toward the nipples where they come through the rim, you'll see that it's pretty close to dished. Remember, the nipples are staggered. They're not quite in the middle, so as it passes by, here, the one that's closer to me is a little bit on my side of the brake bolt. This one's a little bit on the other side of the brake bolt, so the dishing is just about right. Now, we're going to just make some minor corrections for the little deviations that we have left. It's not perfect, right? Like right here, for example, you see that spot? That has to be brought over, so let's find the middle. Okay, I think this might be our last spot that needs to be corrected right here. Now the center in this case is the opposite side. We're going to release it by a half a turn and then tighten a quarter of a turn on the adjacent spokes. Well, that's pretty good. I'd say we have it. Well, you probably think we're finished, but we're not quite. One more thing before you're finished. Let me adjust this bike before we take off the wheel. There we go. The last stage of building a wheel is spoke relieving. Spoke relieving is a process by which you firmly seat the spoke head in the proper position. And you do it, you notice these pairs of parallel spokes as we go around. You spoke relieve the wheel by grabbing those parallel spokes firmly in your hand and squeezing them all the way around the wheel. You just keep on squeezing, and you do it on both sides of the wheel. See, you'll find there are 9 sets of parallel spokes on each side of the wheel. Turn it around. There we go. Now, after you've done the spoke relieving, you may have to do a very minor touch-up true on your wheel. That's because when you put that extra pressure on the spokes, you may cause the head to shift just a little bit, which is precisely what you're trying to do. So now we've got the spokes seated. Let's put it back in our unofficial wheel jig here. Okay, look at that. We did such a good job building the wheel that spoke relieving had practically no effect. But